In a sense, it was a release. There's been divorce, there's been death, there's been now sexual assault. And I had this big fuck it switch mentality. Like, you've all been telling me I have a problem. I'll show you what a problem is. My name is Morgane Conlon. I'm 30 years old. I run a halfway house. I'm a mother, an addict, and a student. So I'm originally from Belgium, living in the north of Belgium. I have an older brother. He is 33 now, 3 years older than me. Mom and dad, happily married. I don't remember much from early childhood. I cannot tell you what I've been through or that has impacted today's behavior. All I can say is that we had literally everything what we needed. There was no abuse, there was no fights, there was no tension. I grew up in a very competitive environment. Probably not with the intention to make it so competitive, but it ended up like that. And I took it very seriously. We needed to achieve, compete, work hard, play hard. That was the mentality. And I had a father who was always there for me, but who definitely also pushed me into that. I was a hockey player. We had to win. I was a horse rider. I had to win. Then I started running 10, 11. I had to win. It was not a chill activity on a Saturday morning to me. If there was competition on Sunday, from Thursday, I started prepping that in my mind. Dad started to prep me for it. Mom and dad, I'd say, were always present, to watch, to be there, to support, to drive, to come fetch, to sit with the tears if I was the second and not the first. But then that competing mentality started to really settle almost on a bit of an unhealthy level for the first time. I'm sure when I'm young, it's all quite innocent. But then it really started to become about being like the first. And then around 14, 15, when I entered the puberty, I was a sporty built young lady. Here and there I got comments from people around me that I was a very sporty built young lady. And then I started to have an idea that maybe I can compete in losing weight. But then, I took this competition also to another level, not realizing that it was a dangerous one to compete in. From there, very innocently, I lost 5 kgs, and then I lost another 5, and another 5, and another 5, and another 5. Total lost about 25 kgs in a couple of months. And it's not that it was an excess of weight that I had to now come to a normal weight. It was a normal weight that came to an underweight, just very sporty. Between 7 and 10 kgs, it was still positive affirmation from the people close to me. From over 10 kgs, people started to be concerned. From the beginning, help was always there. Go see a nutritionist, go see a dietitian. Maybe you need to speak to a psychologist. What's going on with you? Why are you losing so much weight? But in my mind, every time I looked in the mirror, it was looking better. And every time that weight dropped, there was a smile on my face. Until 5-6 months in, they started to refrain me from doing sports activities. And then they put me in a corner and said, you're either going to get better and start eating, or we're going to hospitalize you. So when I reached 45 kgs, then I went to see a nutritionist and a doctor, and then they officially diagnosed me with anorexia nervosa. But at this point in time, I really cannot tell you that it did something to me, or, with an eating disorder, the more they tell you that oh, you lose weight, oh, you're not looking good, the more your eating disorder is happy and you're achieving. So I did not get a wake-up call whatsoever from having a diagnosis like that. And it was also not for me, I was not really ashamed of it. That was 15, 16, and then because we were in a boarding school Monday to Friday, it was like a thing to on Friday go to the city and drink beers in a pub. From the very start that I started to drink, I could sense there was a different rapport with me with alcohol. I was quickly tipsy or drunk because I wasn't eating properly, and also my eating disorder was playing there, that if I know I'm going to drink in the evening, I'll definitely not feed myself, because I was very much aware that in alcohol there's also calories. I would be on a very strict diet, eat an apple a day for 5 days during the week, and sport and exercise. And then comes Friday, and I would drink 6, 7 beers. I'd have a bench of any food that I can find afterwards. The next morning, I'd feel terrible, and then I would again start to be on a strict diet. So there was a very big overcompensate in terms of consuming and not consuming. Then more on a psychological level, I think my position at that school, which what I portrayed and what was really going on, is a perfect example of this inner fight. For example, I was president of the school, which is really, you are a role model of a typical student at that school. But meantime, I was smoking from my room on the balcony. I was drinking wine with a teacher at lunchtime and being romantically involved, if I may say. The more I pushed myself in between the lines and showed how good I was and show how an example I am for everyone, the more I think privately I had this urge to get out of those two lines. But when I started uni, there wasn't that gap really about in the weekends and week, dates non-stop. For 10 months you party, you do whatever, and then for 4 months or for 8 months, and then for 4 months you lock yourself up and you study 20 hours a day and you pass. And so I did, but this alcohol consumption became more and more, which also led, like if you drank every night, you can only imagine how much I consumed then. So I picked up a lot of weight as well, started to get a little bit more swollen from the alcohol. I think at about that age, I ended up already 2 or 3 times in hospital because of too much to drink. I was literally a wrak, we say, like couldn't walk anymore. I was blacking out. Yeah, there was definitely already like concerns raised, like why is it that she's always so drunk. It was also at the time that the situation at home became less and less good. My parents started to fight more and more. So 5 years ago, I would tell you it had a huge impact on me because, it's a divorce and it's a traumatic event for a child. But to be honest, today, I was already so consumed unconsciously by the inner fight that at that point in time, it did not really consume me. I think it was at the beginning of my 3rd year bachelor's that back then I was together with another boyfriend who had a car accident. I was in Spain. I got a phone call from my parents saying, you have to come home. And then on my way to the hospital, they told me that Julian had died. And of course, it's traumatic to be sitting next to someone that at this point in time, you call him your boyfriend, that is literally not there anymore. But I was definitely using that and using my parents' separation as the excuse to now fuck out on the other side. Even though I can honestly tell you today that probably my tiredness to fight and to keep esteem high and up was bothering me more than the divorce and all of that. But, a divorce and a boyfriend that wasn't there anymore was definitely a better justification to not start my third year bachelor's, to move cities, to start working in a restaurant during the day and in a bar at night, to live in terrible conditions. I remember arriving there and then finally I said, fuck it all. Now I'm gonna do it problematically. And I started to drink, in my mind then, problematically, which means drinking during the day, which means drinking hard liquor, start taking drugs there as well, especially in the bar environment at night. Cocaine came in the picture. Started to get involved with a lot of men, women. So in a sense, it's going to sound very bad and strange, but in a sense it was a release to not have to think about how I'm going to hide my game, to not have to think about my alcohol breath in the morning, to not have to think about when I need to stop drinking and start studying. And in the first couple of hours in that bar work were quite normal, but then around 11 o'clock at night we started to drink as well behind the bar. So then things got a little bit more ugly. We're doing more cocaine to keep going. And then every time after our shifts, then we would go out, end up in someone's house. So I'd either black out then and there, or I would find a way to my own place to stay with someone. And I had this big fuck it switch mentality. Like, you've all been telling me I have a problem, I'll show you what a problem is. I think it was those years of suppression and that I just let go. It was after a couple of months that I think my family had a kind of sitting together, and they put me in front of a choice. My dad was living in Brussels at the time, so he said I can live with him and resume back and finish my bachelor's, or I can remain there, stay there, and keep doing what I was doing. So fortunately enough, I decided to take my family's suggestion and to go back to Brussels. I lived with my father, and obviously there were already boundaries in place that I couldn't drink anymore there because they really knew then that it was a problem. What I do remember is that the bulimia became very intense. I'd eat and binge and purge, and sometimes a setting would be 16 hours where I would wake up, go to the shops, start binge, purge, go back to the shop, just eating, purging, studying a little bit in between and trying to finish that up. Although the periods with alcohol and drugs looks much worse in terms of emotionally how I felt in that moment in time, I was very suicidal at a point. The plans were made, the cord was there. It was one of the lowest periods of my life, I think, in that point in time. And my self-esteem was so low at the time because of all the purging. Your face swell up, your glands swell up. So my face was completely swollen, my body was swollen, my hands were swollen. So I remember looking in the mirror and just said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. The moment I would give a glimpse of I want help, family would be there with the psychologists, the hypnotists, the everything with an S I've been to. But then still there was a reservation of I can still do this by myself. Around 2014, I finished my bachelor's. I was 21 years old, and then I decided to do a master's, but to do a master's in a different city in Ghent. In that 2 months between bachelor's and master's, something happened. I think I ended up in hospital again. And then my parents already told me, enough, you need to stop now. So I went to the Alcoholics Anonymous in Belgium. And I decided to stop drinking. But it took me 2 months. And I think in my first month of starting my master's, I started to drink again. I drink alone a lot, which back then was already kind of normality for me. I wasn't like shocked. I've already really accepted that, kind of. But I would still, to make yourself feel better, find friends for every night of the evening to go and have a drink with. In the 4th or the 5th month there, a casual night, going out, we drink, and I don't really remember how exactly I came home, but I always have to cross the park if I did walk home, and often I would walk home. The one evening I remember being stopped by a man and that he forced me in having sexual interactions, having sex. It comes in blurs. I know 100% that it did happen because I also had bruises on my body from it. I remember waking up the next day alone in my flat and still in that moment I did not connect really to being it a rape or being it even sexual assault, because I've had many encounters. I'd wake up often next to someone that I don't really know, but that day was different. And instead of, when you ask me, is this a lighting point? Is this a damage that will now make you realize that this needs to stop? And it wasn't, because the worse things would get for me, the more crazy things I would do after that. Instead of a normal person would then realize, stop doing it, avoid it. For me, it would be even more a fuck it switch. There's been divorce, there's been death, there's been now, it's another thing that I've been through. Now I can go even crazier. Now the little boundaries that I do have left, also these one can disappear. And I can go crazy. After that happened, I started to get even more involved with men or boys. I would be the partner to do the threesome, to do the foursome, to do whatever, because they knew that if I'm drunk, I'd do anything. And no boundaries, no female dignity was present anymore. And then a second incident happened where someone came up to my flat. I was living on the 1st floor. And I remember fighting it. Whether usually I don't fight it, whether it's because of I'm too drunk or I just give up, or maybe I want it. Eventually there was sexual intercourse, and then that person left. And the problem is that I kind of know who that person is. In that year, I crashed 2 cars. I ended up 3 times in the police vans. There was a hospital there, St. Camillus Hospital in Ghent. I had 4 admissions there. I knew very much at that moment in time that things were going completely the wrong way. But I wanted to finish this master's. And then I said, okay, then I'll take care of myself. But then after master's, I started to work in a B2B position in a luxury chocolate brand in Brussels. So, and that would be typical me. I get my shit together, superficial shit together. I'd score, so I excelled in that company for like 3 months. But then came December, and the moment there was a little bit of release, I started to release 1000% on the other side again. I started to drink a lot more again. I did a lot of drugs as well. But very quickly things became unmanageable. Money started to run out. Family started to know again what was happening. And then through that person that was working in the shop downstairs, his girlfriend, she was an escort, but she had a boyfriend, but she was an escort, introduced me in that world. So I'd say, yeah, it's quick money, it's 400 euros in a night. I justified in the same way that I justified working in a fancy restaurant. I was not working as a prostitute, I was working as an escort, just to try and make myself feel better. But the reality is the job is the same. And waking up next to an old man and seeing the cash on the left, yeah, I realized then that it was against anything I believed. Now and then I'd like reflect back, because obviously you're intoxicated most of the time. Sure, there's periods where you gain a little bit of sobriety, but you don't have a clear mind at all, because your mind is so consumed by how am I going to get that next one. April, May 16 was worst. Yeah, at work, I will not disclose where those men come from. It was regulars, so it wasn't, no, I'm justifying, but it wasn't every night someone different. You know, I go for dinner, I get my booze, I don't have to pay anything, and then we'd go to a hotel. Through all of that, it was okay for me. But it was that next morning when you wake up and kind of sobriety is starting to kick in, withdrawals are starting to come. I just remember it's one particular person who did me a lot of, not hurt in the same way that I was hurt by sexual abuse or whatever, but it was disgusting. It was just disgusting to wake up and yeah, it was disgusting to wake up and be next to someone, and I'm just not proud of myself. To realize that you lost the game, or the battle, because it wasn't a game. There was no game intention. But yeah, I remember that one morning. It was just not proud of it, you know. And as lonely I was. So lonely with that, because the guilt and the shame was so big. I couldn't call my mother to say where I am. I couldn't call my friends. I couldn't call anyone, because now I imagine what I need to tell them. So it's that loneliness with these events. It's that loneliness the next day. It's that loneliness to go through those shameful things that maybe if I wasn't lonely, at least I wouldn't stay in it and get worse, because it gets so much worse. Never in my life I would have thought that I would end up there. I didn't see it at home. I didn't see it around me. It wasn't an example. It wasn't a point of discussion. I didn't know it existed until wrong people, one time, one booze, and there I am. So yeah.
Morgane, chat to me about your brother's wedding.
Yeah, so it was a wedding, and there were two pre-weddings, a civil wedding and a wedding for his employees. He owned his own company. The civil wedding, I drank, and I was not completely drunk, but I drank and I was smelling like alcohol, and so I didn't end well. The one with the employees was at home, so we have to drive 60 minutes, let's say Brussels, Ghent anyway. And I drank all the way from Brussels to Ghent, because back then, you know, it's out there. I have an issue, so no way they will let me drink while I'm there. So what I'll do, I'll empty a bottle of vodka right before the event, which obviously 55 minutes in started to kick in, and I either fall off my chair or things like that. So yeah, those two were very bad experiences, and I think the hardest also for him in the dynamic of the family, that through my behavior I consumed his entire family. So it was all about Morgane's problems and not about him. So he said, I need to protect my own now and my marriage and all of that. So he did say, I'm not rejecting you as a sister, but I'm taking my final distance from you. And then eventually he said it's maybe best that you don't come to the real wedding, the big event. But in the meantime, I was prepping this super nice, amazing speech for him, which I gathered like 100 people for a video, which I traveled to London for to put it together. And all he wanted probably was me to be sober at his wedding. So it was the 16th of June, and the wedding was on the Saturday morning, and I decided to, or I tried to stop drinking the night from the Tuesday to the Friday. And then it was around the Friday afternoon that the withdrawal started to become so big in terms of my body. And then I had to really decide, like, what am I going to do? Because I now need to be there, and they're going to see I'm withdrawing. And so then it was Friday evening that I picked up again. Yeah. And then through the night and through the morning, everyone was doing their makeup together, you know, like as a wedding do. I decided to do my own by myself. And then I rocked up and I saw my brother's eyes and my mom's eyes and my dad's eyes. And I knew that they knew, but they didn't want to make a fuss out of it. So I had vodka in my car. So I would go to the car, drink, come back, go to the car, drink, come back. Started getting more and more drunk. Still somehow performed that speech. But then after that started to openly drink there. And then my dad made a fuss because he saw me with a glass of alcohol. And in front of everyone, he took it away. And then they just removed. Yeah. Then waking up the next day and I couldn't do it over, or I couldn't like, oh shit, can I do it again? What can I do to make it good? It's over. It's done. And my brother has quite a persistent, like he has an impact on me. You know, he's the man. Parents always, you have your own shit with your parents and you can blame them. And I had a lot of cards that I used. But with a brother, there's not much I can use against him. So in one morning I decided I'm going and I'm leaving. And I'm going as far as possible. So then I left. Left the 2nd of August. Arrived completely intoxicated in South Africa. And my journey began. So is life happily ever after when you drop the booze or you drop the drugs? No, at all. And I think it's a big misconception. Whatever I felt before 2016, I felt, but times 10 after 2016. So no, but I wake up and I'm present and I can connect to what I feel. I live a very honest life. I still seek sometimes the extreme, which I will channel in the best possible way that I can. I have connection with my family like very little people do have. I don't have to think 16 times what my story will be before telling my story, which was the case. It's less lonely. I'm not ashamed really from it, but I'm still fighting it.